everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving deep today, folks.
Oh, yeah.
Into some investigative journalism. It's fascinating and kind of heartbreaking, to be honest. We're talking about South Korea's international adoption system.
Oh, wow.
And get this, there have been some pretty unsettling discoveries.
That's interesting. You know, what's really cool about this deep dive is it mixes personal stories with the big historical context. It's not just like dry facts and figures.
Right.
It's about real people's lives.
Exactly. And our sources for today are from a collaboration between the Associated Press and FRONTLINE.
Okay.
They've done some amazing work uncovering this whole story that's been kind of hidden for way too long.
Yeah.
So, you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's rewind all the way back to the Korean War.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's where this whole adoption system kind of got its start. It was focused on finding homes for biracial children, those fathered by Western soldiers.
Right.
I mean, that makes sense. In a way, it kind of solved a problem for both countries.
Yeah, you're right. It seemed like a compassionate solution at the time. But you know what they say about good intentions.
Oh, boy. So then we fast forward a little bit to what they call the baby factory era in the 70s and 80s.
Baby factory.
Seriously, baby factory. That just gives me chills.
Wow.
Adoptions just skyrocketed during this time, fueled by South Korea wanting to boost its economy.
Okay.
And Western countries wanting, well, babies to adopt.
Makes sense. It's pretty mind-blowing to think that South Korea actually went so far as to change its laws to make it easier to send these children overseas. It makes you wonder who was really benefiting from the system.
Yeah, you're telling me. And get this, even back then, people were noticing some red flags.
Oh?
In 1976, there was this BBC program called A Traffic in Babies.
A traffic in babies.
And Patricia Nye, who worked with the International Social Service, she said something that really stuck with me. She said, "We are not talking about little pets or pieces of wood. It's almost like a trade in children." Even way back then, people were worried about the ethics of this whole thing.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that those concerns were just ignored, basically.
Yeah.
Despite all the warnings, the system kept chugging along like a runaway train.
Totally. But hold on, there's a much darker side to this. The AP investigation uncovered some pretty shocking practices. Things like kidnapping.
What?
Falsely reporting children as abandoned.
Oh.
Pressuring parents to give up their children. It's a long and a horrifying list. Can you believe that?
I mean, it's really disturbing that these weren't just isolated incidents.
Right.
It seems like these practices were kind of baked into the system itself.
Yeah. One story from the investigation really blew my mind. This adoption worker said she kept getting sent the same girl.
Wait, what?
But every time, the girl had a completely different background story. How can adoptive families trust anything when the people working in the system are raising doubts?
It just shows a complete lack of transparency.
Right.
And accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you wonder about, everything about the information families were given.
Okay, so now let's talk about the real people affected by this system.
Right.
These stories are really what make this whole thing so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
We got to start with Lori Bender's story.
Lori Bender.
Imagine this. You're 4 years old, playing in your yard, and suddenly you're taken away and adopted by a family in another country. That's what happened to her.
Oh, wow. And what's even more incredible is Lori's mother never stopped looking for her.
Really?
Decades later, they were finally reunited.
Wow. It's amazing they found each other for all those years. Yeah. But think about all that time, a mother searching for her child for decades, not knowing what happened. I can't even imagine.
It really makes you think about the lasting trauma caused by these separations. This isn't just one isolated case.
Right.
We're talking about a whole system built on shaky ground.
And to top it all off, Lori Bender's mother, Han Tae-soon, she's now planning to sue the government and the adoption agency. It's about more than just finding her daughter. It's about, seeking justice and accountability for what happened.
It's a powerful example of how, the past continues to affect the present. These issues aren't just history. They're still very real for the people who live through them. It's a reminder that these issues are far from over. And speaking of lasting impact, have you heard Robin Joy Park's story?
No, tell me.
She got her adoption number tattooed on her back like it was her only connection to her Korean heritage,
Wow,
But then she found out she wasn't who her document said she was.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine finding out your whole identity was basically a lie?
Whoa, that's heavy. So what happened? Was it like a mix-up or something?
It's even darker than that. Sometimes when a child died or was deemed unadoptable,
oh no,
agencies would just replace them with other children.
God.
To avoid all the bureaucratic headaches, they would just switch their identities.
Wait, seriously? They just swapped kids like they were trading cards. That's messed up.
Yeah.
How many people were affected by this?
The AP talked to at least 10 adoptees who discovered their identities had been switched. One woman, Mia Sangyerna, even went to the funeral of a man she thought was her father, only to find out later they weren't related at all.
Man, that's just heartbreaking. It makes you wonder how anyone could be so callous to just play with people's lives like that.
It really raises questions about the role of the agencies and the governments. How could this go unchecked for so long?
That's the question that kept coming up for me as I was reading through all this stuff. It's like, how could so many people turn a blind eye to this?
Okay, let's talk about Robert Calabretta. He went back to Seoul in 2020 to meet his parents for the first time since he was a baby.
His story is so powerful because it shows the impact of these separations on both the adoptees and the families they left behind. It's about loss, longing, trying to reclaim a stolen identity.
So what happened with Robert's adoption? Well, his parents were told he was too sick to live, and that giving him up was the only way to save him. Imagine the agony of being told your child is dead.
That's awful.
Only to find out years later they were alive and well in another country.
That's just devastating. So they gave him up thinking he was going to die.
Exactly. His mother even held a Buddhist ceremony to bless his soul.
Oh my goodness.
Because she believed he was gone. But get this. The documents that went with Robert to the U.S. said he was a normal, healthy baby. No mention of any illness or surgery.
So they lied to his parents. That's just cruel. What happened when Robert went back to Seoul?
The reunion with his father was incredibly moving. His father couldn't even wait out the 2-week quarantine.
Really?
And showed up outside Robert's apartment the day after he arrived.
Wow, that speaks volumes about how much they missed him. So they were finally reunited after all those years. Did Robert stay in South Korea?
He visits regularly and talks to his parents often. He even took a new Korean name given to him by his mother. It's like he's reclaiming his heritage, honoring the family and culture that were taken from him.
It's a beautiful way to come full circle. But his story, like all the others we've talked about, shows just how complex and contradictory this adoption system is. It brought joy to some families, sure, but it also left a trail of heartbreak and unanswered questions.
You're right. And while the South Korean government tried to crack down on some of these practices in the late 1980s, partly because of scrutiny leading up to the 1988 Olympics, the damage was done. The consequences of those past actions are still felt today.
And it's not just a South Korean problem, right? Other countries were involved too.
Absolutely. There are investigations happening in the U.S. and several European countries to examine their role in this whole system. It's about time, don't you think?
It's definitely a long overdue reckoning. But there is a glimmer of hope. South Korea has set up a fact-finding commission to look into these adoptions. Hundreds of adoptees have already submitted their cases, hoping to find answers about their origins and how they ended up being adopted.
It's a huge step towards acknowledging the harm that was done and hopefully creating a more ethical and transparent system for international adoption in the future.
It's like these adoptees, like Lori, Robin, and Robert, are forcing the world to finally confront the truth about this system. We can't just sweep it under the rug anymore.
Their stories challenge everything we thought we knew about international adoption. It's a wake-up call to prioritize the well-being and rights of children above everything else.
This deep dive has been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've gone from the history of the adoption system to the shocking practices that took place, and then to the personal stories of those affected. But we're not done yet. What does all this mean for us and for the future of international adoption?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? You have this system that was supposed to be about helping children.
Right. And it ends up, becoming this tangled web of questionable practices and broken trust.
Yeah, it's like a classic case of good intentions gone wrong. We see how something designed to provide homes for kids, it ends up being manipulated like for profit.
Right.
Even political gain.
Yeah.
It's a harsh reminder that we always need to be questioning things, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as adoption.
Absolutely. We can't just take things at face value. We need to be critical thinkers, ask those tough questions, and demand transparency, from the people and organizations involved. And, the voices of the adoptees are so important in all of this.
Right. Their experiences, their stories, they're really what expose the real human cost of these failures.
Yeah.
And their courage, speaking out, is what pushes us to do better, to demand better for vulnerable children everywhere.
What strikes me is how their stories are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Despite everything they've been through, they're fighting for truth and reconciliation. It's inspiring, really. This deep dive has been a heavy one. There's no doubt about that. We've uncovered a lot of darkness, but it's a story that needed to be told. And even though there are no easy answers, it's a conversation that needs to continue.
Definitely. This isn't just a historical footnote. The impact of these adoptions, both the good and the bad, it continues to this day. It's a story that's still unfolding.
So this leaves us with a question for you, dear listener. What does this story tell us about the complexities of international adoption? What are the responsibilities of everyone involved? And how can we ensure that ethical practices are always at the forefront, when dealing with vulnerable children? It's a lot to think about, but it's worth wrestling with.
It really is. And hopefully, by having these conversations, by acknowledging the mistakes of the past, we can work towards a future where every child has the chance to thrive and know their true identity.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.